Hey there. For those that don't know me, I'm Charlynn, and for those of you that do, then you know that I really like to cook, and I really like to eat, and I really like to share a good meal with friends and family. Today, thank you for watching this. I wanted to share with you one of my family's favorite dishes. It is called Jambalaya sandwiches. Now, if you're like me, you're constantly watching, chefs and reading some cookbooks and learning new recipes. And this recipe was inspired by Guy Fieri. So I've added a few different things to it to make it my own, which I encourage you to do as well. To let you know what all is in this dish, we use a pound of pork. This is a Boston butt that's been cut up in probably about 1/2-inch cubes. I like the Boston butt because it's really pink and it cooks down really tender and has a good flavor. It's not dry like the whiter meat of pork. I use a pound of cubed chicken thighs, the same way, boneless, skinless chicken thighs. I just cut them into 1/2-inch chunks. And then I take a pound of andouille sausage and I cut it in quarter chunks, about the same size as everything else so that they all cook the same. I take about 1/4 pound of thick sliced bacon, about 1.5 cups of celery sliced real thin. I take 1 red bell pepper and cube it into small bite-sized cubes, and then 1/2 of a yellow bell pepper. I also use 1 cup to 1.5 cups of red onions, and many of you already know, I'm sure, how an easy way to dice onions. I hate cutting onions. They make me cry, so I try to get it done as quickly as I can. I make my first slices just following the natural lines of the onion, and then I come on the end and I cut the cube to the size that I want it. Having a good sharp knife is really important. Hopefully I won't cut my fingers off because nobody likes to eat that. So by cutting those, you end up with pieces about this size. So that works out really well. I'll do the same thing to the bell peppers that I slice up, cutting them roughly into the same size chop. And for the celery, I like to cut it to where it looks like this because I don't know why. I just think that looks nice. So I'll slice it on a diagonal and I'll get it as thin as I can. And be very careful when you get up to the end. I'll eat the end piece because I'm afraid I'll cut my fingers if I get too close to it. Okay, so the rest of the recipe contains about 1/4 cup of fresh diced or fresh minced parsley, about 1/4 cup of fresh garlic. So this is about 6-7 good sized cloves. Now you can mince this, or if you don't have a lot of time, I put it in a plastic bag and I take the heavy end of my knife and I just break it up into really tiny pieces. It's a lot quicker than mincing it to me. Sometimes if I have a lot of time, I might do that, but that's just pretty easy. The dish also calls for 1/2 can of diced tomatoes. These are I like to use the fire roasted diced. I like the fire roasted. Now, as far as seasonings go, I'll start off with about a teaspoon of kosher salt. I start out small, that's usually, enough. And you'll taste it at the end and adjust that if you feel like it needs any. So salt is a very, you know, everybody has the amount that they like, or very little. So I'll start off, like I said, with just a teaspoon, and then you can add however much you like. The other seasonings call for fresh ground black pepper. I put about 2 teaspoons in mine. I also add 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper. Now, my family likes really spicy things, so I'll use 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper. And if you like a good flavorful dish, but not real hot and spicy, don't add any cayenne pepper. If you like a little bit of heat, but not a lot, start off with just an 1/8 or a 1/4 of a teaspoon and taste it, and then go from there and add what you want to. I use a lot of different spice blends as well in mine. I mix up, as you can tell, kind of in the bulk family size, a Creole spice blend. You don't have to mix your own. You can go to the store and find one that you like and use it. The one that I mix also has a little bit of cayenne pepper in it, and I use it in a lot of stuff. So most of the ones that you buy in the store, just look and see what they have in them. And if it's things you like, then add it. And if it's not, then make your own. I also get a lot of spices from the Spice and Tea Exchange. This particular one is called a Mariner's Chowder blend. Now, I've never put it in a Mariner's Chowder, but I use it in a lot of other stuff. But it has dried onions, dried red pepper, dried bell pepper, and a lot of other things in it. And I think it adds a really good flavor. You can go get the freeze-dried bell peppers and use those in this if you wish, and that would be just as good. So, first things first, let's get started. The first step is taking your chopped up bacon and putting that in the pot, and we're going to cook that down until it is rendered all the fat and is good and brown. The fat from the bacon is basically what you're going to use as the oil to cook the rest of your items in. And I have to keep it stirred so that I don't burn it. Okay, so when the bacon is done and it's all crispy, you'll take it and just set it aside, because we're going to save that for later to put on top of the sandwiches. So I'm going to set that over here out of the way and cover it up. Then we want to make sure that the oil gets really hot. And then we're going to put in the pork first and start it to brown. Now, one thing I've learned over the years, and that I was taught by a chef, was that if you want your meat to brown really well, is you got to make sure that it's really dry before you go to cook it. I'm sure you probably know that already. Okay. And once the pork starts to brown really good, then I will put in my chopped up chicken thighs. You're going to need to make sure you have a pretty good sized pot to put all of this in, because it's kind of a one pot meal. By the time you get everything added in on it, it's enough to serve probably about 4 or 5 people in sandwiches. So that way you're not having to run at the last minute to try and get a bigger pot. So just make sure it's a good size. then I'm gonna add in my andouille. Now, if you don't want andouille, you can add smoked sausage in place of it. That works well too. Okay, and then I'm gonna start adding in just a couple of my ingredients to let it cook, because this is gonna have to cook for probably about 30 to 45 minutes until all the meat is good and tender. So I'm gonna go ahead and add in my 2 teaspoons of ground pepper, and I'm gonna add in the 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper that I use. And again, if you don't like it spicy, just don't put cayenne in it, or don't use that much. Okay, I'm going to add in about a teaspoon. This is a tablespoon measure, so I'm going to put about a teaspoon of the kosher salt in. And again, when it's finished or close to finished, you can taste of it. And if you think it needs any more, then you can add a little more. But you just can't ever take it back out once you've put it in. So I use a little bit at a time. Now, on the Creole mix, we like this. So I'm probably going to use about just shy of a tablespoon of that. And like I said, you can go buy a good store-bought Creole mix and use that. Just if it, take a look at it. If it has salt in it, then, you know, whenever you use it, of course, just don't use as much other salt that you would put into it. And then for the mariner's chowder that I was telling you about, or the dried bell peppers, if you want to get the freeze-dried bell peppers and use those, I'll probably put in about 2 to 3 teaspoons. I think 3 teaspoons is a tablespoon, but of course you can add as much of that as you like. But the minimum I would suggest if you use it is at least a good teaspoon of it. Then I'm going to add in my mashed up garlic, or if you want to mince your garlic, you can add that now. Gosh, can you smell that? It smells pretty good so far. And then I'm going to add my half a can of tomatoes. I drained a little bit of the juice off of them. Not all of it, but just some of it. And then the last thing I'll add right now is my red onions. Oh, and I lied. The last thing I'll add besides the red onions is the minced up parsley. And I use the flat leaf parsley in this. So, when you get that all mixed up, it looks kind of like that. So it's time to turn the heat down to probably a medium. Put the lid on it, and then you're going to let that cook for about 35 to 40 minutes. You're going to have to come in every little bit and stir it. If you need to add some liquid, you can add a little bit of water along with that. There's going to be a good amount of liquid that cooks out of the tomatoes and some that'll cook out of the meat and the onions, so just keep an eye on that. It's going to depend on your cookware as well as to how much water is retained in it. So you'll let that cook until it gets tender, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay. So after about 35-40 minutes, it's just like magic. And everything is cooked. And everything's tender. And that's what the meat base looks like now. So when you get to this point and the meat's good and tender, you can make sure your oven is warm to about a good 350 degrees. And we're outside in our outdoor kitchen today, so we're going to use our grill to do the bread. But when the meat's ready, then we're going to add in our vegetables. And get those stirred in. Now, sometimes I like to put poblano peppers in this. I like colorful vegetables because I think they're pretty. And the tartness of the yellow and red bell pepper, I think, are really good. So you'll turn that down to low and just let the vegetables, you want them to be about a crisp tender. Now, if you want them a little softer, cook it a little longer. But while the vegetables are cooking, you can use hoagie rolls. I usually get a French loaf, and for this one I'll cut it into thirds and then slice it. And then what I do in the top is I'll take a little bit of that extra bread in the top out, because it kind of, when you go to put the sandwich together, it'll help that stay together. It gives a good pocket for the meat to go into. Now you can save this bread and you can make croutons out of it. I like to chop it up and use it to make breadcrumbs with. I like to use this like in crab cakes when I make them. See, I cannot cut my hands. So I just kind of hollow it out like that a little bit. And I'll take a little bit of butter. Spread that on them. Well, can't use that butter. Okay. Clean up my mess here before I get it all over me. And then I'm going to place the ones that I've buttered in the oven or on the grill so that they can start to toast a little bit. So when the bread gets toasted, you can take it out of the oven or off the grill, and that's what I'm doing. Okay. And then I'm going to bring this pot over here. Doesn't that look good? We're going to start by filling in that trough there that we put out. Ladling some on the sandwiches. This time I'm using a pan for my grill because I don't want to drop all this stuff down in the middle of it. Okay. And then, because there's not enough on here, you take these bacon pieces that are nice and crispy and top over the top of that. And I like to put Havarti cheese over the top of it. You can use whatever cheese you really like. And then you're gonna carefully, hopefully I won't spill this so bad. Just kind of pop these back in on top of each other. And sit them back in the oven for a little bit just so that the cheese melts. Okay, so when all the cheese is melted in a few minutes, you'll take your sandwiches out of the oven. Or in my case, the grill. And there's your finished jambalaya sandwich. Looks pretty good. Let's see. It is really good. I hope you enjoyed spending this time together. I hope you like the recipe. If you can look for it or ask me for the recipe, we'll get that to you. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to you joining us again for the next one. So thank you very much, and see you later. Oh, I'll bring my sandwich.